Namaskar. Welcome to this five-part series on currency. And the first two episodes will be mine. Third, fourth, and fifth are my conversation with a noted blogger, author, and expert on digital currency. His name is Tom Luongo, as we discuss the new initiative that the United States is bringing out that is going to turn the world of currency upside down. I can guarantee you, by the time you are done watching these five episodes, you will understand the importance of this. Many are not even realizing what is coming down the pipeline, and it's coming down sooner than you expect. So I'm going to share with you this through these five episodes. It will come probably once every 2 days on what exactly is going on in the world of currency, why is a reset needed, and how is this reset being done without damaging the existing infrastructures for the most part. If somebody has been profligate, that could be a problem, but everybody needs to see these things because we've spent a lot of time putting together this episode for you. This one alone has 29 reference links. Can you believe that? 29 reference links, because that's how much information we have put together for you so that you understand the importance of currency, how currency determines our overall wealth for the most part. And even if you have other things like a house or something like that, you still need a currency to convert it into a form that is more liquid, meaning more acceptable. So this is the whole story. And if you wonder what was used during Ramayana, what was used during Mahabharata, in fact, we have proof of what was used during Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, and we're going to share that also. Fascinating stuff. You need to understand how, as a medium of transfer, currency has evolved over thousands of years. We're looking at a probably 4,000 plus year window here. So let's jump right in. A small request to all of you to please like this video, and if you have not already subscribed to our channel, please do subscribe to our channel. From gold to fiat to digital currency. In fact, we're going to start from before gold. How were things, for example, in the Mohenjo-Daro Harappan civilization? So this one started in 2600 BCE, and it is supposed to have ended around 1900 BCE. No one knows what happened, but we have had several experts weigh in on P-Gurus itself that there perhaps was an uncontrolled thermobaric reaction or some sort of a nuclear reaction, if you will, and that caught everybody by surprise. That's why there is no show of anybody trying to flee anything. Everybody was carrying on as usual, and suddenly everything just evaporated. As a matter of fact, people who go to Mohenjo-Daro sites now, even now see traces of radioactivity in simple things like pots and pans. Why would they be having signs of radioactivity? There are no nuclear site mines in that area. So what happened? So that is the question that's uppermost on everybody's mind. So how did they do it in the times of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa? Well, they relied extensively on barter, but even to do barter, you needed to have some sort of a standard to understand what anything and everything was worth. That's why they made standardized weights. And these standardized weights, and I'm going to show you some pictures, they are made from chert or other materials, and they were found at Mohenjo-Daro, showing that they use precise systems for trade and exchange. See here, these are all some of the materials. You can see some markings, but you can see the geometric shapes and forms of all these various elements that were used in terms of trying to trade. Now, how did they trade and exchange? Well, in Mohenjo-Daro, they had engaged in direct exchange of goods and services without the use of money. This barter system facilitated local and long-distance trade, connecting the city with distant trade networks. So two things that have been discussed now in terms of looking at the symbols of Mohenjo-Daro Harappa civilization. One is the language used, and the other are symbols that have been used to sort of help them out in terms of whether it was the currency or the purity of the alloy that was used. I mean, there were gradations for that, tin-based alloys, bronze, all these things were done in this era. And we've had many conversations with Dr. Kalyanaraman. You remember that in that part. So They had a method and it worked very well across the world. To ensure fairness and consistency in transactions, the inhabitants developed standardized weights, typically made of stone, which were used to measure commodities accurately. This is where I told you about the seals that were discovered. You see how there are various animals in that one seal, the top left seal, and how it changes shape, and multiple animals in one structure, and all these things were made of either steatite or terracotta or copper, and they were likely used for trade and administrative purposes, possibly as a form of signature or identity marker for merchants. Interestingly, in November 2023, a pot full of copper coins was discovered at the Mohenjo-Daro archaeological site in Pakistan during conservation work. This exact time period and other relevant details of these are pending laboratory analysis. It's possible that they even had some sort of a coin system as way back as in the Mohenjo-Daro age. We will know, because see, if you look at history, right, the area that was the Saraswati Valley civilization, not much is talked about. Who ruled there, what happened, like for example from 2600 to 1900. Let's say the 𝗟𝗏𝗏 experiment happened in 1900. For the next 1000 years nobody knew what happened. In fact, the next we pick up the action only when Ashoka is talked to have been the governor of Takshashila province, and that is in 300 BCE, and Alexander came in 325 BCE. So you're talking about something of 1000 plus years where nothing happened. What happened? Did people live there? Was agriculture even possible? All these are questions. I'm sure someday we will know the answers to all these things. The conclusion is, while Mohenjo-Daro did not have a formal currency system involving coins or paper money, the civilization employed sophisticated methods for trade and economic transactions, including barter system, standardized weights, and the use of seals for administrative purposes. The economic system was fairly advanced, I can tell you. And during the colonial period, gold-backed currencies became a cornerstone of global finance, deeply entangled with European imperialism. I'm skipping a few hundreds of years here. The reason is that gold coins started in the 8th century BCE in what is modern-day Turkey, and from there, it started getting used. Not everybody used gold. Some used silver, some used alloys also. And because you could mint it in a certain way, and you had to have metal craftsmen who could make each. See, there was no mint. So how did they do it? They had to handcraft the coins. So this was a challenge. So you didn't see a lot of these things. So somewhere along the line, gold was used, silver was used, and in fact, one of the names given to the Singapore dollar in Tamil is 𝗟𝗟. 𝗟𝗟 means silver. 10 𝗟𝗟, 20 𝗟𝗟s, or something like that. So this is even today, people talk about, if you talk about pricing of a product, they say so many 𝗟𝗟 if you're talking in Tamil in Singapore. Anyway, so we are skipping some parts where coins were in use, but the coins that were used were either square or round. It is believed that the Romans introduced a round shape, and before that it was square, and perhaps even other shapes. You saw in Mohenjo-Daro the shapes were cubes, right? Now, the first colonial dominance, because Britain started becoming a major player in colonizing the whole world, the first time a coin or a currency was established was in Britain in 1821. But see, even before that, Benjamin Franklin in the late 18th century, 1776 and so on and so forth, 1748 to 1776, there were only 13 colonies at that point of time. And he realized that a gold coin got a lot more bread in Pennsylvania as opposed to Boston. And there, if you read his autobiography, there are several funny stories about how he miscalculated, because he was the first one to figure out how to print paper currency. First one. And he did such a good job. In fact, if you read his autobiography, you can get pictures of his hand-printed paper currency also. It was very difficult to duplicate. In fact, impossible, I would say. So he had a printing press, and he knew how to print secure currency. And once he did it for one state, all the other states sort of became his customers. So he did very well. I mean, he was an inventor, he was a thinker, he was a man who was very philosopher beyond his time. I mean, Benjamin Franklin was the first one to essentially make paper currency available in America, and then slowly Britain and Europe also started adopting it, and in 1821 Britain formalized it, because at that time Britain was a big colony. A lot of countries started using it. By the late 19th century, most European colonial powers, the United States and Japan, had adopted some form of the gold standard, some form, essentially pegging their currency to gold. It became the foundation of international trade, banking, and empire building. I'm sorry, I got something wrong here. Let me go back and fix it. Just a second. Okay, I'm back. Wrong key pressed on my clicker. So these currencies helped consolidate economic control, enabled imperial trade, so that somebody who was using a pound had a comparable value, because each of the colonies, the British colonies, had a different currency. South Africa had rand, India had the rupee. You understand what I'm saying, right? And so how do you come and bring about parity? We're going to talk about that also. See, the classical gold standard, prevalent from the 1870s to the early 20th century, required currencies to be directly convertible into a fixed amount of gold. So they would say, like, okay, 1 pound is equal to 10 ounces of gold. That meant that if you gave 10 ounces of gold, you got a 1 pound note, or conversely, if you gave a 1 pound note, you got 10 ounces of gold in exchange. And they fixed something different for India. That also is a sleight of hand. Just wait and see how that plays out for India. This system facilitated stable exchange rates and international trade. Sure, colonial powers often extended this monetary framework to their colonies, integrating them into the global gold-based financial system. But remember, like I said, that at some point of time this was going to break, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment. Then how did things work out in India? In India, there was a silver standard era from 1835 to 1893. India operated on a silver standard with silver rupee as a sole legal tender. You know, when you say India at that point of time, the British had colonized much of Burma. They had also colonized some colonies and Malaysia. All these were part of Britain. And therefore, the money, whatever they devised for India, that held true probably from Attock all the way up to Singapore and beyond. This was all same currency, one currency that used this. Then what happened was, because the value of the silver was declining, the British colonial administration sought to stabilize the currency by linking the rupee to gold. The Indian Currency Committee, headed by Fowler, recommended fixing the exchange rate at 15 rupees per British sovereign. So this was the exchange rate that they had, 15 rupees. Now, what happened was, this move effectively placed India on a gold exchange standard, where the rupee's value was pegged to gold indirectly through the British pound. India, tied to the British monetary system, faced severe deflation during the global economic downturn that happened in the late 1890s and up to 1930s or so. Wholesale prices plummeted by approximately 36%, severely affecting the agrarian economy. When Britain abandoned the gold standard in 1931, they abandoned it. The rupee, still pegged to the pound, was effectively devalued, impacting trade and economic stability. So even before they left India in 1947, Britain had effectively devalued India's currency. And how this currency still had a lot of staying power and how we ruined it is a story for a different day. But here are some examples of how other countries used gold-backed currency. Ecuador, Spanish colonies. You can pause the video here to read about what they did. I'm just going to move on. Danish West Indies, Denmark had a part of West Indies, introduced the daler with gold coins like the 10 daler piece, minted to align with the gold standard practices of the time. So there were some Caribbean colonies also that were using gold-backed currency. Now, Interestingly, in America, in American colonies, they often issued paper money known as bills of credit, which were not backed by gold or silver. These currencies were primarily used to pay public debts and taxes, but faced issues like depreciation and limited acceptance in private transactions. In fact, there are interesting stories about what happened in 1792. During at that time, they used to call these things as IOUs. It's section I-O and U, but it is IOWEU. Essentially, the government would sell these things. The face value was like $100, but because there were so many of those and people really needed actual cash, what they would do is they will go to the market and they'll try to say, okay, I have 5 bills, but I will settle for like $80 to $100 IOU. So somebody bought the IOUs and paid $80. So essentially, they were immediately coming out ahead by $20. And then if you had enough IOUs, they were just waiting and seeing when the government of United States would say, okay, we will start encashing all your IOUs in exchange for real dollars. This did happen at some point of time, but there were lots of fights going on within the newly formed country of America. It's a story for a different day. I just want to go back to gold-based currency and how things changed rapidly around the two world wars. Now, while the United States was using these IOUs, the British policies rooted in mercantilism restricted the colonies' access to gold and silver, exacerbating monetary challenges. Did you know that they banned the use of gold? That nobody in United States could keep gold? That was in effect for many, many years. They basically banned anyone from keeping gold. That's when platinum became popular. That's when De Beers diamonds became popular. So you see how all those things came about. So anyway, the interwar period is the period between First World War and the Second World War, and the Great Depression that actually happened during that period exposed the rigidity of the gold standard, leading many countries to abandon it in favor of more flexible monetary systems. You know, this peg to the gold, they couldn't lose it, they couldn't leave it, they couldn't keep it either. Especially if you went to war, you had to spend a lot of money, you had to print a lot of currency, and if you didn't have the gold to back it up, guess what happened? Your currency got devalued. However, the currency devaluation was not properly propagated across the world. So there were lots of frictions because of that. Then finally, in 1931, Britain left the gold standard, and it was followed by United States in 1933. If I remember 1931 itself, South Africa also left the gold standard. There are stories by Wilbur Smith about how a small group of people knew this and they profited enormously. The implementation of gold-backed currencies during the colonial period significantly influenced global trade, monetary stability, and economic integration of colonies around the world. Now, because of the fact that there was a limited amount of gold, remember, that is one of the biggest challenges. Gold is not infinite. So the gold is limited, and if you peg it to a certain value, and if you are going to try and print more, then that peg goes away. Then anybody who's basing any of their transactions on the peg stands to lose. Did that happen in 1971? I'll come to that in just a moment, because we still have a seesaw happening. So when the Second World War was ending around 1944, it was very clear that the Allies were going to win. It was just a matter of time. Then everybody, about 44 countries, got together in a place in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods, and they signed an agreement that was pivotal in shaping post-World War II economics and finance. It was held at the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. The conference brought together 44 allied nations. India was not invited to that. Establishing a stable international monetary system to prevent economic turmoil that had contributed to the Great Depression and the war. The agreement established a fixed exchange rate system where the currencies were pegged to the US dollar, which in turn was convertible at the rate of $35 per ounce. $35 per ounce. Now, if you think about 1 ounce, that's approximately 31 grams, I think. So it was probably, you can say, $1 per gram, $1 per gram. So you can easily do it, right? If I had 300 grams of gold, then I had $300, something like that. See, easy math. But then see what happened. This is in 1944. How did the par came about? The Bretton Woods systems established the British pound, the German mark, and the French franc, all on par value. Par is 1:1, 1:1 ratio. And the United States dollar, that meant 1 pound equals $1, 1 German mark equals 1. I think that is the par, although I could be wrong here. I need to go and look at that, if it was indeed that way or if it was indeed something else like a fraction. Be that as it may, that fraction or the par number didn't change for some time. And I'll come to that in just a moment. So the US dollar in turn was pegged at $35 to an ounce of gold. Now, not only did Bretton Woods have this agreement, they also created two big banking institutions, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. So now you see how all these things had their birth in the World Bank. But this system collapsed. America could not sustain the $1 is equal to 35 ounces of gold. They couldn't do it, and there are a couple of reasons for that. One was that France was never a fan of this. So okay, let's get back a little bit. 1930s, late 1930s, all countries realized that a second world war was imminent. Late 1930s, or even probably into the early 1940s. So what did they do? They took their gold and put that in United States. The New York Fed and some other places, including the Fort Knox, everywhere gold was deposited by all these countries, because they knew that in Europe their gold wasn't safe, right? So what happened was France also deposited a bunch of its gold in the United States, and after 1944 and during the Reconstruction post-war, France would insist on getting back the exact same gold bar that it had given to US for safekeeping in 1940s. Imagine the amount of work it would do. You're talking about huge vaults with lots of bars of gold, and they would say, no, I want exactly this marking. You know, if you've seen the movie Italian Job, they'll talk about gold ingots with a Balinese dancer on the face of the ingot. So they used to essentially, they used to irritate US no end, because this was all being done free. And what would Charles de Gaulle do, the man who ran France post World War II? He would send in the naval warships of France to accompany this gold back to Paris, to France. So at some point of time during this, US went to war against Korea. Then they went to war against Vietnam. So sustaining this peg was becoming well nigh impossible. So in 1971, Richard Nixon suspended the dollar's convertibility into gold, effectively ending the Bretton Woods system. You know what happened? The value of 1 ounce of gold shot up. It is believed that it went up tenfold, then it settled down a little bit. But even as late as in 1980s, when I was in the United States, it was still around $280, $300 per ounce. It's only now that it is sitting at $3,500. Basically, gold will go up whenever there is uncertainty, and it will come down when there is certainty. This has been my life experience. Now, the shift marked the transition to floating exchange rates, where currency values are determined by market forces. Remember, before that, everything was pegged. Everything was pegged. Then what happened was everything now became, okay, so how much trade do you have? If you are a net exporter, you are more valuable. Your currency is more valuable. If you are a net importer, your currency was less valuable. Things of that nature, all these things were devised, and then you started having, after 1971, these exchange rate mechanisms, and then people started making money off of that also. But you get the point that from 1971 up until now, we are having what is called as paper currency or fiat currency. Remember that couple of things for why United States dollar continues to be the standard, global standard world over. Well, the US dollar is the only currency that has never been withdrawn from circulation. Never. See, for example, the British pound, they withdrew 100 pounds and higher denominations because people were copying them. Same thing with euros. They used to have $500, 500 euros note also. Now you don't find them. So all these countries, including India demonetized their higher value currencies, right? 500, 1,000, 2,000, what have you. So through all this, the United States never withdrew any of its note from circulation. I mean, think about this also. The United States dollar bill is the same size no matter what the value on it, face value. $1 is the same size as the $5, as the $10, as the $20, as the $50, and the $100. In fact, there is a story in Amazon, I think, season 2 of 𝗥𝗘𝗙𝗥𝗏, where they talk about how one company finds out a way to take a $1 bill, strip it of all its markings, and put a $100 print on it, and then sell it outside of United States, because they know that they will not be able to get the same security threads as a $100 bill. But if you are selling it outside of United States, who cares, right? Some poor pauper somewhere, they might still be accepting it. But that was the whole premise of the story. The point I'm trying to make is that United States dollar still is legal tender. Doesn't matter when you got it. Although people now tend to complain a lot when you give some older $100 bills. They like to have the newer $100 bills. They have been changing too. North Korea is believed to be one of the biggest counterfeiters of the United States dollar bill, and perhaps China is also doing something. So now we have done end of part 1 of this monologue, and what we have done is we have looked at various currencies and why the currency has moved from barter system to gold to currency backed by gold to just paper currency, and next step is digital currency. In episode 2, I'll talk about what was the need for digital currency. I mean, the first one that comes to everybody's mind is the Bitcoin. Excuse me. Why was Bitcoin even conjured? Why was it even thought of? What was it trying to solve? All this and more in the next episode coming in a couple of days' time. After that, my conversation with Tom Luongo on the latest genius act that the United States Senate has passed, and it is expected to sail through the United States Congress, after which a lot of things are going to change, guys. A lot of things are going to change, and this affects anywhere, you living anywhere. That's what we are going to be talking about. So please do watch all these episodes, and we'll of course make a playlist of it and share them with amongst your friends and family, because money is money. Money is what makes the world go round. Thanks for watching. Let me see if there are any questions from you all. I think there are 1 or 2 questions. Let me just line it up. Milburn Cherian wants to know when taxes were started. I think the British started the taxes, I think in the 18th century or something like that. And United States also followed suit a little bit later. Initially, US only levied tariffs. Next question from Magnet Ranga. Bharat is said to be the largest holder of gold, but a large part of it is held by individuals and families, and that is not accounted. Is there a way and possibility to get such holding accounted? Nobody will tell you how much gold they have, Rangaji. And people have ingots after ingots buried in vaults in their homes. And what about all the gold stored in the temples? So I have done a guesstimate. There are a couple of episodes I did on gold. Yes, India has the largest deposit of largest holder of India is the largest holder of gold, but it is scattered among 1 billion people. So it's going to be difficult to pull them out of that. The only thing you can do is to give them incentives, like for example, say that you can bring your gold in. We have something called as a spectrometer in which you can put your equipment, whatever the gold is. It will run some tests on it and tell you the purity and the value on that day of that particular thing. and you might be able to create that as an asset, for example, to qualify to an EMI loan. See, this is the way you find out how much gold you have, because once the country knows how much gold it has, it can effectively leverage it, because what's coming down the pipeline requires you to have strong assets, and gold is the strongest asset of them all. Very good question. Thanks for asking this question, Rangaji. Next question from Manov-san. What about the value of other hard commodity assets like oil? Can rare earths or uranium or other clearly useful materials be incorporated into a basket of hard material costs? No. What's going to happen is something simpler. Just wait till you see the series and you'll understand what it's all going to be. Last question here. OMG wants to know, can there be a digital currency backed by gold, that is a digital rupee? Yes, something like that is being planned. That's what the episodes 3, 4, and 5 will talk about. We're going to talk about what is the new system, why the new system, what problems does it solve, who is going to be in trouble because of there are countries that are going to be in trouble, and why. The next question is from Manov-san again. Trump's latest threats to Japan mean they are being squeezed to maximum. Could Japan's alliance to US weaken if US tariff pressure and inflationary devaluation of Japan's assets in US euro trust? Well, Japan was holding some of the largest US treasury bills, and now they want to exchange those for yen. You can't stop anybody from doing it, but these are all standard theatrics that happen. I think the United States wants Japan to sign a trade tariff deal. I think Japan is slow walking it. I don't know the exact reason for that, but be that as it may, I think it will happen in course of time. But in between, there'll be some elbow wrestling, arm wrestling, and so on and so forth. So that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar.